My boss laced his fingers together, his smirk dripping with false sympathy. Emma, your dedication is inspiring. But we're promoting Jessica. She's got that natural leadership quality. I kept my face blank as I handed him the envelope. His confusion was delicious when he discovered not just my resignation, but the signed contracts with our biggest client, who just agreed to follow me to my new firm. We've decided to go with Jessica for the senior contract specialist position. The words hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. Richard's office suddenly felt smaller, the air thinner. I maintained perfect composure, spine straight, hands folded neatly in my lap, face a carefully constructed mask of professional disappointment. Not devastation. Not rage. Just the appropriate amount of disappointment a dedicated employee might show after being passed over for a promotion. I see. My voice didn't waver. 7 years of negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts had taught me something about poker faces. Richard laced his fingers together on his polished mahogany desk. The desk I'd helped him earn with my billable hours. His lips curved into what he probably thought was a sympathetic smile, but the smugness leaked through like oil on water. Emma, your dedication is truly inspiring, he said, leaning forward slightly. Your technical skills are exceptional. But leadership requires a certain, natural quality. Jessica has that intangible something. The executive presence. Translation. Jessica laughs at his jokes at happy hour while I'm still at my desk closing deals. I nodded thoughtfully as though considering his wisdom. I understand, I said, my voice measured and calm. May I ask what specifically I could improve for future consideration? The slight widening of his eyes told me he hadn't expected such a reasonable response. Richard shifted in his leather chair, the one purchased after I brought in the Westbrook Industries account last year. Well, it's not really about improvement. You're excellent at what you do. It's more about... He gestured vaguely with his manicured hands. Executive presence. Team dynamics. Jessica connects with people. Jessica connects with the right people, I silently corrected. Specifically Richard and the other 3 men on the executive committee. Through the glass wall of his office, I could see her watching our meeting from her desk, pretending to review documents while stealing glances our way. Her designer blazer, purchased with the company card for client meetings, perfectly complemented her highlighted hair. I appreciate the feedback, I said, reaching down for my leather portfolio. The one I'd bought myself after bringing in Meridian Systems, which had increased our annual revenue by 22%. No company card required. Richard relaxed visibly, clearly relieved I wasn't going to make a scene. In his world, women who expressed disappointment were emotional. Women who expressed anger were difficult. I would be neither. Great. Well, I know you'll continue to be a valuable member of the team. Jessica will need your support during this transition, he said, already reaching for his phone, dismissing me. I stood up smoothly, smiled professionally, and placed a sealed cream envelope on his desk. What's this? He looked up, brow furrowed. My formal response to the promotion decision, I said pleasantly. Please review it at your convenience. I'd appreciate your signature on the second page. Confusion flickered across his face. This wasn't in his script. Good. I turned and walked out, shoulders back, head high. Jessica quickly averted her gaze as I passed her desk. 3 other associates suddenly became very interested in their computer screens. They all knew I'd been passed over again. The elevator doors closed and I allowed myself exactly 3 deep breaths before the mask slipped back into place. My Monday morning routine continued as usual. I nodded to Greta at reception, waved to Marco from IT, and settled at my meticulously organized desk. 8:47 a.m. My phone pinged with a text from Meredith, the retiring finance director. Did you do it? I typed back a simple, done. Opening the envelope now. On my screen, I pulled up the quarterly revenue report I'd compiled but never shared with Richard. The one showing I'd personally managed 42.7% of Henderson and Myers client contracts last quarter. The one showing my billable hours exceeded Jessica's by 43%. The one showing client satisfaction scores where my name consistently topped the rankings. The phone on my desk rang precisely at 9:05 a.m. Richard's extension. I let it ring twice before answering. Emma Lawson. Emma. His voice was tight. Could you come back to my office, please? I'm preparing for the Dawson conference call at 9:30, I replied calmly. Would 10:15 work? The pause was delicious. Now would be better, he said, a new edge in his voice. I arrived exactly 3 minutes later, enough time for him to stew but not enough to claim I was being insubordinate. The envelope lay open on his desk, its contents spread before him. His face had lost its smug confidence, replaced by something between shock and anger. What is this? He jabbed a finger at the papers. My resignation letter is on top, I said helpfully. Effective immediately as outlined in Section 3 of my employment contract regarding past promotions. I'm aware of what a resignation letter looks like, he snapped. I'm asking about this. He held up the second document, the one with Westbrook Industries letterhead and freshly signed contract. That would be Westbrook's new service agreement, I replied evenly. Richard's face flushed. With a company called Outcome Partners? What the hell is Outcome Partners? I allowed myself the smallest smile. My new firm. His voice cracked. This is Westbrook. They're our biggest client. They were, I corrected gently. The CEO was quite interested in our new contract model. One that bills based on successful outcomes rather than billable hours. They've committed to a 2-year exclusive arrangement. Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish suddenly finding itself on dry land. His eyes darted to the signature page where Thomas Westbrook's distinctive scrawl made the $60 million transition official. This is breach of contract. This is client poaching. His voice rose with each word. I shook my head slightly. You might want to review Section 8.2 of my employment agreement. Non-competes are unenforceable in this state when an employee is passed over for promotion twice in favor of less qualified candidates. I paused. Your legal department drafted that clause, actually. Ironic. The blood drained from his face as comprehension dawned. He wasn't just losing me. He was losing Westbrook. And not just losing a client. Watching them sign on with a revolutionary business model that would make Henderson and Meyer look outdated and overpriced. You can't, he started. My personal items have been cleared from my desk, I interrupted smoothly. My files are organized according to company protocol. Jessica should have no trouble taking over my remaining accounts. I allowed myself the smallest pause. Those that decide to stay, of course. I stood smoothing my skirt. I'll need your signature acknowledging receipt of my resignation. Richard stared at me, seeing me, truly seeing me, perhaps for the first time in 7 years. You've been planning this, he said slowly. I met his gaze evenly. Let's just say I've learned to prepare for all potential outcomes. That's what makes a good contract specialist, after all. I walked out without waiting for his response, past Jessica's desk where she sat frozen, past the curious eyes of colleagues who would soon be scrambling as news spread. My phone buzzed with a text from Meredith. Conference room booked for 2 p.m. 5 more ready to sign. The morning sun felt different on my face as I exited the building's revolving door for the last time. I hadn't just resigned. I hadn't just taken a client. I'd changed the game entirely. And I was just getting started. The morning air felt electric against my skin as I walked away from Henderson and Meyer for the last time. Freedom has a particular scent, like rain-washed concrete and possibility. I checked my watch. 9:47 a.m. By noon, Richard would be in emergency mode. By end of day, panic would set in. I smiled at the thought, allowing myself this moment of satisfaction as I slipped into the corner cafe where I'd spent countless lunch breaks crafting my escape plan. 7 years ago, I'd walked into Henderson and Meyer with starry-eyed optimism and a freshly printed law degree. I remembered my first week. The pride of having landed at one of Chicago's most prestigious legal consulting firms, the weight of my new business cards in my pocket, the earnest belief that dedication and excellence would be recognized and rewarded. The memory of my first stolen idea surfaced as I ordered my usual Americano. It was during the Calway manufacturing contract negotiation, barely 6 months into my tenure. I'd developed an innovative approach to their international licensing structure that would save them millions while ensuring better compliance. I'd shared it during the team meeting, watching the partners nod with approval. 2 weeks later, Mark Daniels had presented it as his own breakthrough during the client meeting. I'd sat silently at the conference table, stomach churning as he accepted praise for my work. When I confronted him afterward, his response had been casual, almost bored. That's how it works here, rookie. For a team. Ideas belong to the firm. His eyes had flickered to the corner office where Richard held court. Learn to play the game if you want to get ahead. The barista called my name, interrupting the memory. I collected my coffee and found a quiet corner table, pulling out my phone to check for messages from Meredith about our afternoon meeting with the other defectors. The pattern had continued through the years. My contract solutions for Barton Healthcare had become Jessica's innovative approach. My risk mitigation strategy for Pioneer Tech had suddenly appeared in Richard's presentation to the executive board. Each time I swallowed my frustration and worked harder, believing that eventually results would speak for themselves. It wasn't until the Meridian Systems project 3 years ago that the deeper problem came into focus. Their CEO, Diane Winters, had pulled me aside after we'd finalized their service agreement. "Emma, I want to be straight with you," she'd said, voice low. "We're signing with your firm because of your approach, but I have concerns about your billing structure." I'd stiffened, thinking she was negotiating for lower rates. "The billable hour model creates perverse incentives," she continued. "Your firm has no motivation to solve our problems efficiently. The longer it takes, the more you make." Her words had struck like lightning. Of course she was right. Our entire business model rewarded inefficiency. Partners celebrated associates who could stretch 20-hour solutions into 40 billable hours. We tracked hours captured rather than problems solved. Success meant maximizing the invoice, not maximizing client outcomes. That night I'd started a new spreadsheet, one I kept strictly on my personal laptop. I began documenting client frustrations, whispered complaints, and the disconnect between what they needed and what Henderson and Meyer delivered. Over coffee meetings and after-hours calls, I asked careful questions. How did they measure success? What kept them awake at night? What would they change about working with legal consultants if they could? The patterns emerged clearly. Clients hated unpredictable costs. They resented paying premium rates for junior associates learning on their dime. They wanted partners in their success, not vendors with conflicting interests. Late nights in my apartment became dedicated to designing a different model. I covered my walls with sticky notes and flow charts, sketching an approach that would align my interests with my clients. My kitchen table disappeared under legal pads filled with formulas and projections. The solution crystallized gradually, fixed fees tied to specific outcomes, clearly defined deliverables with success metrics, shared risk and reward. A complete inversion of the billable hour paradigm that had dominated legal consulting for decades. But the pivotal moment, the one that transformed theoretical rebellion into concrete action, came 6 months ago during the Westbrook Industries annual contract renewal. Thomas Westbrook had requested a private lunch. As CEO of our largest client, such requests weren't unusual. What was unusual was his choice of venue, not the usual expense account steakhouse, but a modest sandwich shop near their offices. "Emma, I've always appreciated your straight talk," he said after we ordered. His weathered face looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "So I'm going to be straight with you. We're considering other options when this contract ends." My stomach had dropped. Losing Westbrook would be catastrophic for Henderson and Meyer, and would likely be blamed on me, their account manager. "May I ask why?" I kept my voice even, professional. Thomas sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "Last quarter we paid your firm $427,000. I've been trying to justify that expense to my board. The complex regulatory framework," I began automatically. "Isn't the issue," he interrupted gently. "The issue is that I can't connect those hours to actual business outcomes. We're paying for time, not results." He leaned forward. "Do you know what my manufacturing division head asked me?" He said, "Why do they get paid the same whether we win or lose?" Something shifted inside me at that moment, the final piece clicking into place. I took a risk. "What if there was a different way?" I asked. "What if you could pay for outcomes instead of hours?" His eyebrows rose. "I'm listening." "A fixed fee structure. Clearly defined deliverables. Performance bonuses tied to your success metrics. A true partnership where we succeed only when you do." Henderson and Meyer would agree to that? Skepticism colored his voice. "Not them," I said, the words forming before I'd fully processed the implications. But I would. The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours. By the end, the outline of outcome partners existed on a napkin between us, and the seed of my departure from Henderson and Meyer had firmly taken root. In the weeks that followed, I meticulously prepared. I incorporated my new firm, secured modest office space, and drafted the revolutionary contract model that would become my signature. I identified other overlooked talents at competing firms who shared my vision. And I carefully, quietly, laid the groundwork with Westbrook's legal team for their transition to my new company. My phone buzzed, pulling me back to the present. A text from Meredith. Richard in complete meltdown. Board emergency meeting called. Jessica looks like she's seen a ghost. I smiled, finished my coffee and stood to leave. The seeds of discontent had been planted years ago by Henderson and Meyer themselves. Today they would begin to harvest what they had sown. And I would begin to build something better from the ground up. I left the cafe and headed toward the co-working space I'd secured 3 months earlier. My temporary headquarters until Outcome Partners' official launch. The irony wasn't lost on me that while Richard had been busy scheduling champagne celebrations for Jessica's promotion, I'd been signing a lease and ordering business cards. My phone buzzed with another text from Meredith. Meeting's still on for 2. Bringing the financial projections you requested. P.S. Your replacement desk plant is already dead. I smiled despite myself. Meredith Collins had been the most unexpected part of my plan. The firm's finance director was hardly someone I'd pegged as a rebel. With her sensible shoes, meticulous accounting standards and 27 years at Henderson and Meyer. Yet she'd become my most valuable ally. Our unlikely partnership had begun 4 months ago during the annual budget review. I'd noticed discrepancies in how client profitability was calculated and had sent her a detailed analysis. Rather than dismissing my observations, she'd invited me to lunch. You're the first person in 15 years to actually understand these numbers, she'd said, studying me over her glasses. And you're right, the metrics are flawed. That lunch had turned into a series of conversations where Meredith gradually revealed her own frustrations with the firm's increasingly profit-driven culture. When I cautiously shared my alternative vision, I expected skepticism. Instead, she'd become its champion. I'm retiring in 6 months, she told me. Too late to change Henderson and Meyer, but not too late to help build something better. With Meredith's guidance on financial structure, my vision had gained solid footing. But I knew I couldn't build a revolutionary firm alone. I needed a team of like-minded professionals. Ones who wouldn't run straight to Richard with my plans. The industry was full of brilliant people held back by outdated structures and biases. I'd spent years observing who was overlooked, who grumbled about the status quo, who showed flashes of innovative thinking quickly stifled by tradition-bound partners. My first recruitment target had been Alice Chin, a contracts associate at Davenport Legal whom I'd met at industry conferences. Brilliant but repeatedly passed over for promotion due to her lack of polish. Code for her direct communication style and refusal to engage in office politics. Our conversation at a legal technology summit had been carefully casual. Ever wonder why we're still using the same billing model from the 1950s? I'd asked as we waited for a panel to begin. Her eyes had lit up. Only every single day. My clients hate the unpredictability and I hate tracking my life in 6-minute increments. 3 coffee meetings later, Alice had become the first member of what I privately called my shadow network. She'd agreed to join Outcome Partners once it launched, bringing her expertise in technology contracts and her loyal client relationships. Next came James Washington, a risk assessment specialist whose innovative approaches at Berger & Klein were consistently sidelined for more conservative methods. Then Nadia Patel, whose client-oriented mindset had made her popular with customers but unpopular with partners focused on maximizing billable hours. One by one, I'd identified and carefully recruited a team of 6 exceptional professionals. All undervalued at their current firms, all excited by the vision of a different kind of legal consulting practice. The delicate balance was maintaining absolute secrecy while continuing to perform flawlessly at Henderson and Meyer. I couldn't risk Richard discovering my plans before they were fully formed. Each meeting was conducted off-site, each communication carefully worded and sent through personal accounts. The ethical considerations weighed heavily. I'd reviewed my employment contract repeatedly, ensuring I operated within its boundaries. I never approached Henderson and Meyer clients directly about my new venture while still employed. I never used company resources for my planning. I maintained a clear boundary between my work for the firm and my preparation for independence. Still, the conflict troubled me during sleepless nights. 7 years of my professional life had been devoted to Henderson and Meyer. Despite the slights and stolen credit, part of me still felt the pull of loyalty. Or perhaps it was just familiarity disguised as loyalty. One particularly difficult evening, I'd called Meredith in a moment of doubt. "Am I being petty?" I'd asked her. "Throwing away a stable career because I didn't get promoted?" Her response had been characteristically blunt. "Emma, this isn't about a promotion. This is about building something that actually serves clients better. If you stay, you're choosing comfort over purpose." Those words had strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about professional recognition. It was about creating a model that aligned with my values. The most intensive planning had happened during twice-weekly strategy sessions in my apartment. My dining table became command central as my shadow team gathered after hours. Laptops open, takeout containers scattered among legal pads and spreadsheets. "The key is quantifiable outcomes," James had insisted during one passionate debate about our contract structure. "We need metrics that clients and we both agree represent success." "And scalable pricing tiers," Alice added. "Not every client needs the comprehensive package." Nadia had focused on the client experience. "We need to demonstrate value from day one. No more mysterious processes hidden behind legal jargon." These sessions had refined my initial concept into a comprehensive business plan. We dissected traditional contracts, reimagined client onboarding, developed proprietary assessment tools, and created transparent pricing models tied to specific deliverables. The breakthrough in our payment model had come from Meredith. She'd arrived at one session with a stack of spreadsheets and a gleam in her eye. "What if," she'd proposed, spreading the papers across my table, "we structure a baseline fee plus performance incentives? Clients get certainty about minimum costs, and we get rewarded for exceptional results." Her decades of financial expertise had transformed theoretical ideas into practical systems. She'd shown us how to build profitability without exploiting clients, how to structure contracts that protected cash flow while aligning interests. As I entered the co-working space, modern, filled with natural light, nothing like Henderson and Meyer's wood-paneled stuffiness, I felt a surge of certainty. The shadow network was about to step into the light. My temporary office held a simple desk, my laptop, and a whiteboard covered with our launch timeline. On the desk sat a small potted plant, a gift from Alice with a note. "Something new is growing." I checked my watch. 11:30 a.m. In 2.5 hours, my shadow team would gather for the first time as official partners and outcome partners. Westbrook Industries would be announced as our founding client. And Henderson and Meyer would begin to understand exactly what they had lost. My phone buzzed again. A text from Thomas Westbrook. "Richard called. Offered 15% discount to keep our business. Told him we're not looking for cheaper hours. We're looking for better results. Good luck today." I smiled, setting my phone aside and opening my laptop to prepare for the afternoon meeting. The seeds of discontent had grown into a network of shared vision. And now, that network was about to change everything. The 2 p.m. meeting with my shadow team, now officially my partners, ended with quiet determination rather than champagne. We weren't celebrating yet. Today marked the beginning of our real work, not its culmination. "I'll see you all tomorrow at the new office," I said as we gathered our materials. 9 a.m. sharp. Our permanent location was nothing like Henderson and Meyer's gleaming downtown high-rise with its panoramic lake views and pretentious art collection. We'd chosen a converted textile factory in the West Loop. A brick building with exposed beams, factory windows, and a history of making things that served practical purposes. The symbolism wasn't accidental. While Henderson and Meyer sold prestige and tradition, we would sell results and innovation. Their mahogany and leather projected establishment, our brick and steel projected substance. After the meeting dispersed, I drove to the new space for a final inspection before tomorrow's official move-in. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long rectangles of light across the polished concrete floors. The contractors had finished right on schedule. Workstations assembled, network installed, conference room ready with its reclaimed wood table. I walked through slowly, mentally placing each team member in their space. Alice near the windows where she worked best. James by the strategy wall where we'd map client projects. Nadia close to the collaboration area she'd helped design. My own office was modest, glass-walled for transparency but positioned to allow private conversations when needed. No status furniture, just functional design. The only indulgence was a small balcony overlooking the neighborhood, where I imagined taking breaks when strategic thinking required fresh air. As I stood in the empty space, I replayed the morning's events in my mind, the culmination of months of careful planning. I'd arrived at Henderson and Meyer earlier than usual, before most associates. The security guard had nodded his usual greeting, unaware it would be our last. My desk was exactly as I'd left it Friday. Organized, minimal, professional. Nothing personal had decorated my workspace for months. I'd been slowly removing items, preparing for this day. The few remaining personal effects fit into a small bag. A fountain pen from my father, a leather notebook, reference materials I'd purchased myself. Company items stayed neatly arranged. I was determined that no one could claim I'd left things in disarray. More important than physical objects was digital evidence. I connected my external drive, carefully keeping it separate from company equipment, and transferred final copies of my performance metrics, client satisfaction surveys, and revenue reports. All data I was entitled to under my employment agreement, all meticulously documented for the inevitable legal challenges Richard would attempt. My final task had been backing up email exchanges that demonstrated my ideas being appropriated without credit. Not for litigation purposes, I had no interest in a protracted legal battle, but as protection against any attempt to damage my professional reputation. By 8:30 a.m., all evidence of my 7 years was contained in one small bag and one small drive. 7 years distilled to what could be carried in one hand. It should have felt sad. Instead, it felt like liberation. The memory of Richard's face when he'd opened the envelope still brought a flutter of satisfaction. I'd seen the exact moment comprehension dawned. The widening eyes, the slackening jaw, the flush of angry disbelief. He hadn't just lost an employee. He'd lost a cornerstone client and faced an existential threat to his business model. "This won't stand," he'd sputtered, legal threats already forming. "No court will allow this kind of innovation." I'd suggested calmly. Client-centered service? Ethical business practices. His incoherent rage had told me everything I needed to know about the true values of Henderson and Meyer. Not once in his protests had he mentioned client needs or service quality. His concerns centered entirely on revenue loss and competitive threats. When I'd walked out of his office for the final time, the ripple effect was immediate. Associates looked up from their desks, sensing something momentous. The firm operated on subtle hierarchies and power dynamics. They could read the shift in the atmosphere like animals sensing a coming storm. Jessica had caught my eye across the office, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to uncertain concern. She'd wanted my job title, not understanding the burden that came with it, especially now. "Emma," she'd called as I headed toward the elevator. "Is everything okay?" I'd paused, considering my response carefully. Professional until the end. "Congratulations again on the promotion, Jessica. I'm sure Richard will fill you in on the Westbrook situation. They'll need immediate attention." I'd offered a small smile. "Their contract transition is somewhat complex." The confusion in her eyes had shifted to the first flickers of panic. Jessica was many things, but she wasn't stupid. She could sense she'd inherited a potential disaster. As the elevator doors had closed on Henderson and Meyer for the final time, I'd permitted myself one small private smile. Not of malice, but of completion. Phase 1. Concluded perfectly. Now, standing in the new Outcome Partners office as sunset painted the brick walls golden, I finally allowed the emotional dam to break. 4 months I'd operated with ruthless compartmentalization. Planning while performing, building while maintaining, creating while concluding. I sank into my office chair, the only piece of furniture already in place, and felt the first tear slide down my cheek. Not from sadness or regret, but from the overwhelming release of pressure. 7 years of suppressed frustration, of smiling through stolen credit, of watching mediocrity rewarded while excellence was exploited, all of it washed through me in waves. Fear followed quickly. I'd left the security of an established firm for the uncertainty of entrepreneurship. 6 people had trusted my vision enough to join me. Westbrook had staked their legal strategy on our unproven model. The responsibility was enormous. But beneath the fear lay something stronger, a bedrock of certainty. The model was sound. The team was exceptional. The market was ready for disruption. And I was, finally, the architect of my own destiny. As darkness fell outside, I moved through the office, turning on lights one by one. Tomorrow these spaces would fill with energy, ideas, and purpose. Tomorrow we would begin to build something that reflected our values instead of compromising them. My phone buzzed with a text from Alice. Just got a call from Kenneth at Meridian Systems. Heard about your move. Wants to be our second client. Says he's been waiting for someone to fix this broken industry. You free for lunch tomorrow? Vindication surged through me. This was never about stealing clients. It was about answering a need that had always existed but that traditional firms refused to acknowledge. I walked to the windows overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Richard was likely huddled with his partners strategizing damage control. Jessica was probably poring over the Westbrook files, realizing the complexity she'd inherited. And Thomas Westbrook was perhaps explaining to his board why their legal strategy had just improved dramatically. I took a deep breath and turned to leave, pausing at the door to look back at the empty office that would soon become a hub of transformation. On the wall, our simple mission statement awaited tomorrow's unveiling. Success is shared. Outcomes matter. Clients first. The perfect exit wasn't just about leaving Henderson and Meyer. It was about entering something infinitely better. The morning after my final visit to our new office, reality hit hard. Westbrook Industries and the newly interested Meridian Systems represented impressive wins. But 2 clients, even large ones, weren't enough to sustain a firm of 6 partners and the support staff we needed to hire. We had 6 months of operating capital. The clock was ticking. Our official launch day brought excitement tinged with anxiety. As we gathered in our new conference room, Nadia voiced what everyone was thinking. Henderson and Meyer isn't going to take this lying down, she said, tapping her pen against her notebook. Richard has connections throughout the industry. We should prepare for blowback. She wasn't wrong. By the end of our first week, we'd heard from 3 prospective clients who'd suddenly backed out of meetings. One was honest enough to tell us why. Richard Holloway called my CEO personally, the operations director admitted. Said you were facing potential legal action for client poaching. We can't risk getting caught in the crossfire. That Friday, James slapped a legal letter on the conference table. Cease and desist, he announced. They're claiming we're misusing proprietary contract language. Are we? Alice asked, reaching for the document. Of course not, I replied, maintaining my composure despite the knot in my stomach. They're phishing. Standard intimidation tactics. But privately the pressure weighed heavily. Each morning I arrived at the office before anyone else, reviewing our financial projections, adjusting our runway calculations. Each evening I was the last to leave, often sitting alone on my small balcony, wondering if I'd led my team off a cliff in pursuit of a vision only I could see. The turning point came unexpectedly. The Chicago Legal Technology Association had invited speakers for their annual conference. When a scheduled presenter canceled last minute, Meredith, now our official financial advisor, leveraged her connections to secure me the slot. This is our chance, she said. 75 decision-makers in one room. Make it count. I spent 3 days preparing that presentation, distilling everything we'd learned into 20 minutes that would either launch us forward or confirm we were tilting at windmills. The conference room was half empty when I began. An unknown speaker in an unfavorable time slot. But as I spoke, outlining the fundamental misalignment between traditional billing models and client interests, people drifted in from other sessions. By the time I revealed our outcome-based contract framework, showing actual results from our work with Westbrook, the room had filled. Legal consulting doesn't have a knowledge problem, I concluded. It has an incentive problem. When success for the firm means maximizing hours instead of results, clients inevitably lose. We've created a model where we only win when you win. The questions afterward weren't skeptical but hungry. Business leaders struggling with legal costs wanted to know more. In-house counsel frustrated with unpredictable budgets requested meetings. Even 2 law school professors asked for materials to share with their classes on legal innovation. That presentation became our turning point. We refined it into a roadshow presenting at industry events across the Midwest. Our calendar began filling with exploratory meetings. Not all converted to clients, but enough did to extend our runway. Henderson and Meyer's counterattacks intensified. They dropped their rates for key prospects we were approaching. They circulated rumors about our financial stability. One particularly aggressive partner even called our landlord, suggesting we might not make our lease obligations. But the market was responding to our message. Mid-sized companies especially, those big enough to need sophisticated legal help but small enough to feel the pain of traditional billing, began signing on. They'd been caught for years between expensive big firms and insufficient small practices. Our model offered them sophisticated service with predictable costs tied to measurable outcomes. 4 months in, we hired our first 2 associates. 6 months in, we added specialized practice areas based on client demand. 8 months in, we moved to a larger space in the same building, taking over the entire floor. Our contract model evolved through real-world application. We developed tiered pricing options, industry-specific metrics, and shared risk provisions that traditional firms couldn't match without fundamentally reorganizing their entire business approach. 9 months after launching Outcome Partners, I attended the National Legal Innovation Summit in Denver. During a morning coffee break, I turned from the refreshment table and found myself face-to-face with Richard Holloway. The shock registered on both our faces. He recovered first, forcing a tight smile. "Emma, I heard you might be here." "Richard," I acknowledged with a nod. "Enjoying the conference?" He glanced down at his program, which featured a panel I was leading that afternoon on alternative fee arrangements. "It's always good to keep up with trends." I noticed the new stress lines around his eyes, the slight dishevelment of his normally impeccable appearance. Henderson and Meyer's name badge on his lapel now featured a new tagline: value-based legal solutions. "I see you've updated your branding," I observed. He straightened defensively. "The industry evolves. We evolve with it." "And how's Jessica handling the transition to value-based billing?" I couldn't resist asking. "It requires quite a different mindset from hourly work." His expression tightened. "Jessica has moved on to other opportunities." Translation: Jessica had failed spectacularly when actual results were required. As awkward silence stretched between us, a conference organizer approached. "Ms. Lawson, your panel prep meeting is starting." "If you'll excuse me," I said to Richard. He nodded stiffly, but as I turned to leave, he called after me. "Emma." I looked back. Was it always about this? Building a new model? Or was it about proving a point? The question surprised me with its vulnerability. For a moment, I glimpsed the uncertainty behind his polished facade. A man watching the industry shift beneath his feet, scrambling to adapt practices he'd spent decades mastering. "It was about alignment," I answered honestly. "Creating a system where doing right by clients means doing well ourselves." He absorbed this, then asked more quietly, "And the timing?" "Right after the promotion decision." I met his gaze directly. The promotion was just confirmation of what I already knew. That my vision for legal consulting would never fit within Henderson and Meyer. He nodded slowly. "Well, you've certainly made an impression on the industry." It wasn't quite an acknowledgement of my success, but it was the closest thing to respect he'd ever shown me. 1 year to the day after I'd placed my resignation letter on Richard's desk, we gathered at Outcome Partners to celebrate our anniversary. The team had grown to 17 people. Our client roster had expanded to 23 companies. Our revenue had exceeded even Meredith's optimistic projections. As I looked around at the faces of my team, dedicated, energized, proud of their work, I realized that success had redefined itself. Yes, we'd built a profitable firm. Yes, we'd attracted impressive clients. But our true accomplishment was larger. 3 of our competitors had introduced their own versions of outcome-based billing. Legal publications had run features on the value revolution in consulting. Most tellingly, clients across the industry had begun demanding different fee structures from their existing firms. We'd changed more than our own trajectories. We'd shifted the expectations of an entire industry. I raised my glass to my team. "To 1 year of Outcome Partners," I said. "And to all of you who took the risk to build something better." Glasses clinked amid cheers and laughter. In a quiet moment during the celebration, Meredith found me on my office balcony, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Thinking about Henderson and Meyer? She asked, joining me at the railing. I smiled. Actually, no. I was thinking about tomorrow. About where we go from here. She nodded approvingly. That's why you succeeded, you know. Richard is still trying to preserve the past. You've always focused on building the future. As the evening continued inside, I took one more moment alone with my thoughts. My boss had once told me I lacked that natural leadership quality. He'd been wrong. Leadership wasn't about social polish or political maneuvering. Real leadership was about seeing a better way forward and having the courage to create it, even when you had to build the path yourself. I hadn't just found my way out of Henderson and Meyer. I'd found my way forward. And in doing so changed the game for everyone.